Prologue. The sun was a weeping wound on the horizon. It did not move, it did not sink into the embrace of the eastern peaks, nor did it climb toward its zenith to bless the valleys of Eldonia. The sun simply hung there, sickly orange, as if the clockwork of the universe had finally ground to a halt. The light it cast was stagnant, a thin, anemic glow that failed to reach the deep hollows of the world. For 9 months the realm had lived in this perpetual twilight, a long, agonizing dawn, or dusk, no one remembered any more, that felt less like a time of day and more like a sentence. High above the canopy of trees ringing the meadow, a lone ember wing struggled against the thickening air. In the years with the sun, these birds were living jewels, streaks of liquid gold and orange flames that ignited the sky with every beat of their wings. Now the bird's fire was guttering. Its plumage, once vibrant enough to hurt the eyes, was the color of cooling embers. Each heavy stroke of its wings left a thin, wispy trail of gray smoke that hung in the air long after the bird had passed, a smudge of soot against the fading indigo sky. It flew lower than it should, its eternal flame too weak to provide the lift it needed to soar. Below the bird's fading path, in the center of the field, stood the glitter tree. It breathed the heartbeat of Eldonia, a massive, sprawling sentinel of sapphire shadows and emerald glow. It usually hummed with a low melodic vibration that could be felt in the soles of one's feet, but today the hum had turned into a mournful, discordant rasp. The top third of the magnificent tree was already dead. The once shimmering branches were now skeletal, blackened husks that clawed at the air like the fingers of a buried giant. This wasn't a natural rot. The darkness was drinking the life out of the wood, moving downward with a slow, predatory patience. At the base of the trunk, tucked between two massive glowing roots that were still fighting to stay blue, sat a young woman. She looked small against the scale of the tree. Her midnight black hair was matted with the dust of the road, and her eyes, brilliant purple, were rimmed with an exhaustion that went deeper than bone. In her arms she held a bundle of fine, silver-threaded silk. She clutched it with a ferocity that suggested she expected the very air to snatch it away. "The temperature is dropping again," Jules whispered. Jules stood a few paces away, her hand resting on the handle of her walking stick. Her usual bright energy had been filed down to a sharp, nervous edge. She watched the tree line, her eyes darting between the shifting shadows of the yews and the dying crown of the glitter tree. The top branches, the blackness moved another foot down since the sun's last twitched. The young woman didn't look up. She was staring at the infant in her arms. "He's so warm, Jules. It doesn't make sense. The world is turning to ash and ice, but he feels like a hearth fire." "He is a Sundancer," Jules said softly, moving closer to rest a hand on her sister's shoulder. "He's the only hearth we have left." A low, rhythmic thudding echoed from the forest path, not the sound of monsters, but the heavy, disciplined march of boots on moss. A moment later, a band of warriors emerged from the gray mist. They weren't the gleaming palace guard of the south. These were men who had been living in the dirt and the dark. Their leather armor was notched and stained, and their cloaks were frayed at the hems. But they moved with a grim, purposeful unity. At their head was Mac. He was a thin man who walked with the attitude of an unmovable mountain, as if his shoulders were broad enough to carry the weight of the failing sun. He carried a heavy heater shield strapped to his forearm, a thick slab of reinforced wood and iron. Painted across its center was a giant golden emblem of the sun. It wasn't magical. It didn't glow or pulse. It was just paint and defiance, scarred by blade marks and scorched by shadow fire. But the symbol was unmistakable. Where once his lute was strung across his back, now hung a sword, dirty with tales of battle. Mac halted the group with a sharp gesture. He signaled his men to form a perimeter around the glitter tree, their sun emblems facing outward into the gloom. He stepped forward to her, the metal of his greaves clanking. The eastern past is gone, Max said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in his chest. He didn't offer a greeting. The shadows are moving faster than we expected. He shook his head. There are so many. They aren't just hunting us now. They are erasing the path behind him. The young woman looked up, her eyes meeting his. And the others? Scattered, if they're lucky, Mac replied, his jaw tightening. We're all that's left of the vanguard within 5 leagues. We can hold this meadow for an hour, maybe less if he sends the robed ones. He looked down at the bundle. For a brief second, the hardness in Mac's face cracked, revealing a well of love and agony. He reached out a calloused, trembling hand and gently brushed the baby's cheek with a single knuckle. The dancing flame in the baby's eyes acknowledged the touch. The breeze tousled his glowing hair. Is he ready? Mac asked, his voice cracking. He's just a baby, Mac, she whispered, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. He's not a weapon. He's not a king. He's just my son. No, he's more than that. He is hope. He is our only hope. A new voice rasped, sounding like dry leaves skittering over stone. The warriors of the vanguard didn't draw their swords, but they shifted their weight, a ripple of unease passing through the line. From the deepest shadow of the glitter tree, a figure stepped forward. The One. He looked as though he had been carved from the very mountains of Eldonia, and then left to weather for 1,000 years. His robes were gray and tattered, blending into the gloom, and his skin was a map of ancient wrinkles and scars. He leaned on a gnarled staff of weirwood, but his eyes, bright, piercing, and terrifyingly old, showed no sign of frailty. He had been the One since before the glitter tree had sprouted, and today he looked every bit the part of a man about to commit a necessary atrocity. The portal is anchored, the One said, his gaze fixed on the infant. But the boy cannot go as he is. His light is a beacon. If I take him across the veil with his fire burning this bright, Void will sense our trail before he takes his first step on the other side. He will be hunted through the streets of a world that has no magic to protect him. The One stepped closer, the air around him shimmering with a faint, cold distortion. To save the light, we must first make him believe it was never here. The One moved with a deliberate, haunting slowness. He did not reach for the child with the frantic energy of a man in a hurry. Despite the sounds of the vanguard's perimeter tightening and the distant, wet crunch of the shadow steel hitting wood, he reached out as if he were handling a piece of the sun itself. The shroud is not just a mask, the One murmured, his voice barely audible over the discordant hum of the dying glitter tree. It is a lock. It will hold his potential deep within the marrow of his bones. He will grow up feeling different, heavy, like he is waiting for a storm that never breaks. But he will be invisible to the dark. Even if Void knows where we went, he cannot discern who he is. The mother's knuckles were white where she gripped the silk. And when he is ready, when he is of age, then the lock will fail. His power will not be constrained, the One said, his eyes flashing with a brief, terrifying silver brilliance. And his fire will either save him or consume him, a fate we will share. The One hovered his hand over the infant's brow. A low, resonant thrum began to vibrate from the air itself. The baby, who had been watching the flickering sapphire leaves of the tree with wide, flame-touched eyes, went still. As the One's palm descended, The brilliant flame-touched gold of the baby's hair didn't just fade, it seemed to be sucked inward. The vibrant living light retreated, sinking beneath the skin until the locks turned a flat, mundane blonde, the color of dry wheat. The tiny flickers of orange fire in the boy's irises were pushed back, hidden behind a veil of deep, ordinary blue. The warmth that had radiated from the child vanished, and her arms, still trembling, suddenly felt the full weight of what remained. The boy felt heavier in her grasp, the weight of a normal human life replacing the buoyancy of a sundancer. "It is done," the one whispered. Max stepped forward, his heavy sun shield clanking against his leg. He looked at the sundancer, now a boy who looked like any other, and reached into a small leather pouch at his belt. He pulled out a small circular disc of smooth white stone no larger than a coin. Carved in its center was a simple, elegant sunburst. He leaned forward and kissed the boy's forehead. "A piece of the foundation stone," Max said, his voice thick, looking into the young woman's eyes. He tucked the stone into the folds of the baby's blanket, pinning it deep where it wouldn't be easily lost. "So our boy always has a piece of home, even if he doesn't know what it is." "He will think it is a lucky charm," Jules said, her voice watery as she tried to smile. "A bit of junk from a dream." "He is close." Mac turned to Jules, a memory of a smile crossing his face. "Get her out of here. Keep my loot safe." The one turned, the air behind him beginning to ripple and tear. The rift didn't look like a doorway. It looked like a wound in the very air, revealing a glimpse of a world that felt cold, damp, and impossibly gray. The one reached out his long, weathered fingers, trembling slightly as they prepared to take the child. The young woman flinched, pulling the bundle back against her sternum with a sharp, ragged gasp. Her knuckles, already white, seemed to merge with the silver threads of the silk. She didn't just hold him. She tried to pull him back into her own body, a futile attempt to shield him from a destiny that had already begun to turn him cold in her arms. A low, keening sound, barely human, vibrated in her throat, the sound of a heart physically breaking. A heavy, gauntleted hand settled on her shoulder. Mac didn't pull her away. He simply anchored her. When she finally looked up, she didn't find the hardened commander of the vanguard, but a man drowning in the same grief. His eyes were glassy, reflecting the sickly orange light of the unmoving sun, pleading with her through a silent, shared agony. "Let him go," the look said, "so that he might live to remember us." Her resistance crumbled like dry ash. With a slow, shuddering exhale that seemed to drain the last of her strength, she loosened her grip. She didn't hand the baby over so much as allow Mac to gently slide the child from her numb arms. Mac took the boy, his own jaw set in a hard, pained line, and transferred the small, heavy bundle to the one. With a silent nod to Mac, the one stepped into the rift. The air screamed as the portal collapsed, snapping shut with a sound like a thunderclap that shook the very roots of the glitter tree. The young woman stood there, no tears left, the warmth in her arms gone.